set up the game of cribbage, first, set out the cribbage board. Place the pegs in the start area of the board. The cribbage board is used for scoring. Each player will use 2 pegs to keep score. Scoring will be explained further later. It is possible to use a pen and paper to keep score, but it is advisable to have a cribbage board to make scoring easier in this fast-paced game. Next, set up the deck of cards. To play cribbage, you will need a standard 52-card deck of playing cards. If there are any joker cards or extra cards in the deck, remove those from the game before beginning play. Shuffle the cards in the deck and place the deck face down in the middle of the playing area. Next, the dealer will be established. To do this, each player will cut the deck. Basically, one player will grab part of the deck, and the other player will grab part of the remaining deck. While doing this, they must leave at least 4 cards at both ends of the deck. Each player will then flip over their part of the deck to reveal the card on the bottom. The player with the lowest ranked card will become the dealer to start the game. In cribbage, the king is the highest card and the ace is the lowest. If both players draw the same ranked card, they will draw another card until one player draws the lower card. After the dealer is established, they will shuffle the deck of cards again. Then the dealer will present the deck to the other player to cut the deck. To do this, the other player will take part of the top of the deck and place it on the bottom of the deck. After the deck has been cut, the dealer will deal 6 cards, one at a time to each player, starting with their opponent. After each player receives their 6 cards, they will look at their cards but avoid showing their hand to their opponent. Next, each player will choose 2 of their 6 hand cards and place them face down on the table. Both players' cards will be placed together in a pile known as the crib. The cards in the crib will count for the dealer, and will potentially gain the dealer points at the end of the round. The crib will be explained further later in the video. But in general, if you are currently the dealer, you may want to put better cards in the crib. And if you are not the dealer, you may want to put your least valuable cards in the crib. After the crib has been formed, with each player placing 2 of their hand cards into it, it will be placed to the side. Neither player can look at it until the end of the round. After both players have put their 2 cards into the crib, the player who did not deal will cut the deck of cards by grabbing part of the deck. The dealer will then take the top card of the lower deck. Then the rest of the deck will be placed back on top of the deck. The card the dealer drew will be flipped over and placed on top of the deck. This card is known as the starter card. If the starter card that is flipped over is a jack of any suit, this is known as his heels. The dealer for the round will automatically score 2 points, simply for revealing a jack at the start of the round. To score points, the dealer will move their peg up 2 spaces on the cribbage board. Scoring on the cribbage board and how to use the 2-peg system for scoring will be explained further later. After setting up the game, forming the crib, and flipping the starter card, players are ready to start the game. Cribbage is a fast-paced card game where players are trying to be the first to score either 61 points for a shorter game or 121 points for a longer game. There are 2 phases to a hand of cribbage. The first phase is the play phase, and the second phase is counting the hands. Let's look at both of those phases now. The play phase of cribbage involves both strategy and math. To start the play phase, the player who did not deal will lay one of their cards face up on the table and say the value of the card out loud. The values of the cards are as follows. The ace is the lowest card and has a value of 1. Each number card has the value shown. And each jack, queen, and king has a value of 10. After the first card is played, the other player will play 1 card from their hand, but instead of saying the value of the card, they will say the total of the first card and the card they laid on the table. The players will go back and forth, playing cards and keeping a running total, without exceeding the total of 31. Whenever a player plays the last card before the total reaches 31, they score what is known as a go. A go is worth 1 point. You can basically think of scoring a go as scoring 1 point for not allowing your opponent to go. There are 2 basic ways to score a go. The first way is to play a card that prevents your opponent from being able to play, while there is still room left in the total before it hits 31. For example, let's say player 2 plays this card. Player 1 now only has a 9 and 2 10s left in their hand. They would not have any cards to play because both of their hand cards would put the total over 31. They would literally say go to signal that they do not have any cards that they are able to legally play. Player 2 would score 1 point because they played a card that prevented their opponent from being able to go. Whenever a go is scored in this way, the player who scored for the go must continue playing cards from their hand if they are able. So if they have any other hand cards that would keep the total from exceeding 31, they must play them. Let's say they played their 3 and would say 27. After playing that card, player 2 would still have another card in their hand that they could play to keep the total from exceeding 31. So they would have to play that. If you don't have any cards to play after your opponent says go, you will simply gain the 1 point for the go and not play any more cards from your hand. The second way to score a go is to prevent the other player from playing by reaching a total of exactly 31. For example, let's say player 1 plays this card for 10. Player 2 plays this card for 20. Player 1 plays this card for 30. And player 2 plays this card for 31. Player 2 would score 1 point for the go, because they played the ace that made the total 31. The total cannot exceed 31, so they prevented the other player from being able to go. Anytime a player plays a card that takes the total up to 31 exactly, they will gain 1 additional point for reaching 31. Many rules state that reaching 31 is worth 2 points, but that is actually because reaching 31 always goes along with scoring a go. So reaching 31 scores a player a go for preventing the other player from going, and it also gains them a bonus point for making the total exactly 31, for a total of 2 points. After the total reaches 31, or neither player can play a card without making the total over 31, the count will start back at 0. All cards below that point will now be out of play and disregarded. The player who did not play the last card will start the new count. It should be noted that if the total starts over and the other player has run out of hand cards, the player with remaining hand cards will be the only player to play. For example, in this situation, player 2 ran out of hand cards. Player 1 has these cards remaining. After player 1 plays their first card, player 2 will say go, because they have no hand cards. Player 1 would gain 1 point for the go, and continue playing. There are several other ways that players can score points while playing cards. Let's look at those ways now. While playing, if a player plays a card that makes the total of the cards 15, they will immediately score 2 points. For example, let's say player 1 played a 9. Then player 2 played a 6 for 15. Because they were able to make the score 15, player 2 would score 2 points. Whenever a player is able to play a card that matches the number of the card just played, they will score 2 points for a pair. If you can add the third card to a set of matching cards just played, it is a triple and worth 6 points for the player who created it. For example, if the total was 12 and player 1 could play a third 3 to the set of cards, they would call out 15, score 2 points for the 15, and then also score 6 additional points for the triple of 3s. You can remember the amount of points you score because it would be 2 points per pair. A triple could be thought of as 3 pairs at 2 points apiece, for a total of 6 points. If you are able to add the fourth consecutive card to a set of matching cards just played, it is a quadruple. The player who added the fourth matching card to their set scores 12 points. The cards used to make a pair must be played consecutively. So this situation would not represent a pair of threes because there was a 6 played between the two threes. Another way a player can score points is by adding cards to a run. Runs in cribbage are slightly different than runs in most other games. A run must contain consecutively played cards, but they don't necessarily have to be in order. For example, if player 1 played a 4, player 2 played their 5, and then player 1 played their 6, that would be an obvious run of 3 cards, 4, 5, and 6. However, in cribbage, if player 1 played a 3, player 2 played a 5, and then player 1 played a 4, this would also be considered a run, because the cards were played without any other cards between them and could be rearranged into a run. A run of 3 cards will gain the player who played the third card of the run 3 points. Runs can be longer than 3 cards and will score points equal to the number of cards in the run. So a run of 4 would score 4 points. A run of 5 would score 5 points, and so on. One other thing to keep in mind is that double values do not create double runs during this phase of the game. So if these cards had been played, these could not be rearranged into 2 runs of 3 cards. The 2 4s would count as a pair of 4s, but no runs would be scored here. However, if the next player played a 5, this would become a run of 3. Now that we've looked at the ways to score points in the play phase, let's take a look at how to count points on the cribbage board. Scoring in cribbage is done on the board with 2 separate pegs. While scoring your first point or points in the game, simply move one of the pegs up that amount of spaces. As the game moves on, scoring will be completed by leapfrogging the pegs over one another. The peg at the higher score position will tell the current score, and the peg at the lower position will move to the new score. For example, if this player had 10 points and scored another 2 points, they would move the peg that is at the lower score up 2 additional spaces in front of the higher scored peg. Players will start at the start point and move around the board until they hit the finish. There are several different types of cribbage boards out there, so your particular board may work differently than this one. After each player has played all of their hand cards during the play phase, they will move into phase 2 of the game. The second phase of a hand of cribbage is counting the hands. Each player will gather back their hand cards that they played during the play phase. They will now have a second chance to score additional points while counting their hand. The dealer will also score points for the cards placed in the crib. The counting of the hands happens in the following order. First, the player who was not the dealer for the round will count their hand. Then the dealer will count their hand. Finally, the dealer will count the cards in the crib. To count their hands, each player will have their 4 hand cards, plus the starter card. They will score points as follows. First, they will count their cards that can add up to 15. They will score 2 points for each unique combination of cards they have that scores 15. For example, this player could add this king and this 5 to make 15 for 2 points. They could also add this king plus this 5 to make a second 15 for another 2 points. Then they could add their 4, 6, and 5 for a third combination of 15 for another 2 points, for a total of 6 points for their 15s. Next, they will score pairs, triples, and quadruples. A pair of 2 cards will score them 2 points. A triple will score them 6 points, and 4 of a kind will score them 12 points. Next, they will count their runs. These are counted in the same basic way they are in the first phase of the game. A player will score 3 points for a run of 3 cards, 4 points for a run of 4 cards, and 5 points for a run of 5 cards. They will score for the longest possible run they have. So in this example, this player would score 4 points for their run of 4 cards. Players will score points for each unique run they can create. So in this example, this player could create 2 unique runs of 4 cards. 4, 5, 6, 7 using this 4 for 4 points, and 4, 5, 6, 7 using this 4 for another 4 points. This player would have also scored an additional 2 points for their pair of 4s. So this hand would be worth a total of 10 points. Next, they will score points if they have a flush. This is a unique scoring to the hand counting part of the game. There are 2 types of flushes. A 4-card flush is scored if all 4 of the player's hand cards are the same suit. This does not include the starter card flipped over on top of the deck. A 4-card flush is worth 4 points. The other type of flush a player can score is a 5-card flush. A 5-card flush is scored if all 4 of the player's hand cards and the starter card are the same suit. A 5-card flush is worth 5 points. Finally, the player will score 1 point if they have a jack in their hand that is the same suit as the starter card that was flipped over on the top of the deck. For example, this player would score 1 point because they have the jack of hearts in their hand, and the starter card is also a heart. After the non-dealer scores their hand, the dealer will now score their hand. It should be noted that if the non-dealer reaches the winning score, they have won the game, and the dealer will not score their hand or their crib. If the non-dealer did not win, the dealer will score points for their 15s, pairs, triples, and quadruples, runs, flushes, and for his knobs, just like the other player did. After the non-dealer and the dealer have scored their hands, the dealer will score the crib. To do this, they will set their hand cards aside and flip over the 4 cards in the crib that was created at the beginning of the game. The crib will be scored the same way that the hand cards were scored. There is, however, one difference in scoring. A player counting their crib is only allowed to score a 5-card flush. So for example, in this crib, this player would score 2 points for this 15, 2 points for this 15, no pairs, triples, and quadruples, no runs, a flush for 5, and his knobs for 1. After both players have scored their hand cards and the dealer has scored their crib, the round is over, and a new round will start. The player who did not deal in the previous round will become the new dealer. Each player will be dealt a new hand of 6 cards. A new crib will be formed, and a new starter card will be flipped over on top of the deck. Players will then once again complete the play phase and counting the hands. Play will continue in this way until one player reaches either 61 points or 121 points to win the game.